Fallout Equestria, Child of the Stars, Chapter 7, Part 5. The white walls were replaced by strangely familiar surroundings. I was back in the office, or one that looked exactly like it. Wait, this was a memory, or I was in a memory, but how? My mind swam for a moment before settling on feeling irritated. That little robotic bastard tricked me. I had no idea how I could be in a memory. I don't know, maybe her eyes was a memory orb or something? That was the least of my concerns, however. Now she had me unconscious somewhere. I felt a deep, cold dread surge through me, yet this wasn't me. My dread doubled as I suddenly felt the strange body I was now trapped in. The taller frame, thicker build, and muzzle. The sensation of something between my thighs was the last straw. No, I never wanted to be this close to a buck. No way. My host stood behind the wooden desk, as I had done not too long ago, the terminal screen before us emitting its green glow, the likes of which reflected from the polished desk. I could feel my host's heavy hooves go to work on the keys, the password, and I noted swiftly it was Inon. A sight of cold relief escaped my host's muzzle as he looked at the few files that were still on the terminal. Then he paused, locking off with equal haste before all of a sudden, a surge of deep pain tore through us. Something deep inside of him twisted, forcing his hooves from the desk as he convulsed and staggered back. I really hoped that somewhere I hadn't screamed at the pain. It was as if XenoPony had set off a grenade in his chest, and he'd not had the good fortune to die. He gasped desperately, the air like sandpaper grinding in his bone-dry mouth. Something felt seriously wrong with this buck, and the more I thought about it, the more I could feel it writhing within him. The more I really wanted to be out of this memory as well. The pain of another heavy convulsion struck, and I knew that somewhere the real me was definitely crying in agony. Now, it was as if his whole body was being forced through a damaged memory orb, and it felt as if each of his nerves ending were being flayed one by one as unbearable slowly. I almost felt sorry for him, if not for the sensation of my very soul being torn to pieces. As the inner pain subsided slightly, the buck gave an agonized whinny, the dry air slowly escaping his trembling muzzle. Steadily, his eyes rose to the double doors opposite, his hooves quivering. It was then he fumbled for something on the desk before him, a small metal object in the shape of an 8-point star attached to a fine silver chain. It looked old and worn, the once golden metal chipped and dulled by the passage of time. Etched into its center, barely recognizable against the worn surface, was what appeared to be a heart. The buck's quivering hooves struggled to hold the trinket as he tapped it lightly. Now, he was more than trembling, he was burning. I tried to scream as I felt the crackling pain within grow once more, and it was like he was on fire, but on the inside, as if every single part on his body was falling apart in searing agony. He gave a wretched cough, and to my horror, dust bloomed from his muzzle, and even more, strained his hoof as he whipped it over his face. His mouth was drier than the desert, and a tingling taste of iron touched his tongue, yet there was no blood. The dry substance seemed to peel from the inside of his mouth, and glow with a dull orange aura, and with every breath, it tasted as if there was a lightning storm in the air. His eyes burned with a dry heat, the only moist came from the layer of cold sweat that leaked in buckets from his orange coat, turning his magenta mane into a weeping mess. "Overseer, I require assistance," he spluttered with a dry gag, bracing himself on the side of the cheek as another burning surge of agony tore through his quivering body. The small trinket in his hooves fell to the floor as his limbs twisted. The sudden jolt of metal hitting the carpet rang in his ears for far longer than just a simple sound should. Nevertheless, he glared down to see the thing as it popped open. A locket? Wait, no, there wasn't any picture, no. Instead, there was an old mass of cogs, gears, and springs. A music box. Regardless, it was the least of his current concerns as he looked about. Meanwhile, I was fighting hard through the immense pain best I could as my host reeled again. "Overseer, I need to know if it's safe," he wheezed heavily, coughing up more glowing dust. I couldn't think straight, nor could he, it seemed. It was as if his mind was slowly melting, and I could feel his mouth disintegrating with every subtle movement. I could feel a dusty flutter with each dry heartbeat, and he was disintegrating alive. From the inside. Did you save the genetic template? Please tell me it's safe. he begged, then crumpled over to the desk, gagging and coughing. One of his thrashing hooves hit the music box, and we both looked in horror as the limb began to form a glowing patchwork of red lines beneath his sweat-drenched surface, and slowly, the deadly crossword puzzle began to spread up the limb, sending an incendiary pain right through us both as it did so. In the same moment, a similar pattern began to consume his second hoof. Then came the low whirring of clockwork, followed by the soft sound of a beautiful melody. The light notes mixed with a soft chime to form a gentle lullaby. Once it may have been one of the most pleasant, if not slightly romantic sounds in the world, yet in my host's burning ears it merely sounded like a screaming chorus. That same pain flared in his chest once again as it continued, and I could swear I felt his heart not only stop, but explode into dust.
Yes, I have fulfilled all assigned tasks, Mr. Hayland,
the sudden voice of Overseer stated, as the glowing orb appeared overhead. My host fought to turn his head to the hovering robot as it bobbed in the air carelessly.
The specimen implant is stable, yet the catalyst has suffered considerable trauma. May I recommend...
The buck silenced the robot with a painful wave of his glowing forehoof.
No, Overseer, no. You are to continue as planned. Lock the site down, and make sure...
The next set of wrenching coughs lasted for nearly a minute, ending with a strained groan. I did everything my mental prison would allow to ignore the searing pain, and unfortunately, that wasn't much.
Make sure Oracle never gets their hooves on. She can have control of 215. It's...
With an agonizing groan, his words turned into a frantic fit of shallow gasps.
I assure you, Mr. Hayland, that is not necessary. Oracle has given me no cause for concern, and I...
Do it, Overseer. That is an order.
My host, who I now identified as Hayland, barked firmly, interrupting the calm tone of the robot. There was a momentary pause and my host convulsing in pain, all the while with the soft tune continuing to play in the background.
As you wish. I will re-establish protocol. My primary function has been shifted. New goal established. Lock down all facilities, find a suitable genetic replacement for Subject 2, probability of completion in light of the current situation, 0.1%.
The Overseer rambled, oblivious to the buck sprawling about on the carpet before him. With a weak swing of a crumbling forehoof, Hayland dragged himself to the right and staggered to the desk's front. It felt as if his legs were charcoal crumbling under his weight. His mane had begun to glow red like molten iron, and the coat of sweat beginning to boil from his skin as if it were such a molten metal. And with a clumsy stagger, he fell onto his side before the desk, gasping for air like a beached fish. I could do nothing but brace as the feeling of being burnt alive racked him, all the while his hooves tried to grasp the still-playing music box. His weight was fading as if the light breeze could blow him into the sky, and I tried not to think what he was feeling. But it was as if his organs were crumbling to dust inside of him. His vision went black as his eyes slowly vaporized. The only indication I had that the memory still existed about me was the floor, and the weight of the musical trinket he desperately clutched in his forehooves. And that disappeared as I felt his hooves crumble away.
You are our last hope, Overseer,
he gasped out with one last breath. I felt his tongue move in the crumbling ruminates of his muzzle. First, his boiling flesh was gone, then all I could feel was bone. I was still conscious. And why the fuck was I still conscious? He was no more than bones! A flaming blade tore through the very essence of the memory.
Indeed. It seems the forced Ethereum binding has demonstrated its predated course perfectly. I am sorry, Mr. Hayland,
I heard Overseer say over the crackling in my crumbling host's ears, the sound akin to that of a voracious swarm of insects.
Initializing memory extraction.
The muffled voice sounded somewhere in the now complete darkness. For a long second, I just prayed and prayed the pain would stop. All the while, that soft tune continued to play. Only a moment later did I feel his brain collapse into dust, and his very soul followed him into the oblivion. Footnote: level up. New perk added: breaking and entering. You've proven yourself a match for some of the most adept forms of automated security, even if they seem too smart for their own good. You gain 15% extra damage against all forms of automated turrets and security robots.